Welcome back. While the Constitutional Court has granted Parliament a 6-month extension to amend electoral laws, in 2020 the court found the Electoral Act was unconstitutional. It said it had to be changed to allow independent candidates to contest national and provincial polls. One SA movement leader, Mmusi Maimane, is not happy, saying lawmakers have been dragging their feet. He's also not happy with the bill in its current form. He joins us now for this conversation. Dr. Maimane, thank you so much for your time this morning. Let's talk a little bit about even the delay, the extension rather, for a further 6 months. And it's funny how that extension came in on the day in which the actual 2 years that was supposed to be granted for the amendments to take place had indeed expired. What's your take on it?
Good morning, and good morning to fellow South Africans. I certainly think that we've had a parliament that in the last 2 years has pretty much had a holiday. No laws were processed, and this has come at the expense of the people of this country. When you reflect on the fact that they started the urgency of the work in 2022, starting with public consultation, which ultimately meant that they couldn't pass a bill that makes sense in the first place. And secondly, it lacked the courage, the brevity to say, how do we enhance accountability? So even if the Concord, as it has, granted them 6 months, it is only given them 6 months to process this bill through the NCOP and then allow for the president to sign it. It still doesn't give what the people of this country desperately need, which is to hold their public representatives accountable. At some level, people see this as a bill for independence, but actually broader than that. It says that how can we reform the Electoral Act, as Van Zyl-Slabbert, President Kgalema Motlanthe, President Mandela, all had said that maybe we could restore it to a constituency-based level upon which people can directly know who they are voting for so that they can hold those people accountable. At this stage, we just really are awaiting state capture in a different color.
Yeah. You know, Mmusi, as you're speaking here about the bill in itself, I mean, from what we understand, the Constitutional Court was also very careful not to prescribe the electoral model to actually be adopted. Do you think that, given the vagueness within which that ruling was actually made in 2020 for the amendments and not yet prescribing the type of electoral model, gives political interests an opportunity to still disenfranchise and marginalize the potential of independent candidates from actually being appointed to leadership positions and represented in Parliament?
Well, that is precisely what they've achieved, in that if you're an independent candidate, and I think that phrase must be put in context, you know, because sometimes people think these are just loose people who come from anywhere. It just does mean that, in fact, even if it's someone who says, I don't want to be affiliated to a political party, but what I want is to be able to represent my community, my constituency, they need 80,000 votes, whereas a political party, even the smallest of the lot, if it gets 57,000 votes as an argument, it will be able to get 2 seats because the proportional representation benefits it, and the threshold for a political party to participate in parliament is low. The costs that the political party have put to independent candidates are extraordinary. They've made them exactly the same as someone who would be in a political party. And ultimately, I still maintain that it has favored the politicians and the political system in this country because they recognize the fact that where accountability is felt, which is, as has happened at local government, when people know their ward councillor, if they are unhappy with it, they vote that councillor out, and if they are, they vote them in. Why is the National Assembly exempt from that, given the competencies of the National Assembly, such as education, healthcare, and all of those issues? The challenge here is that we have a parliament and a political system that is self-serving rather than the people. And it's evidenced by the fact that even when people have serious allegations to respond to, their instinct is to say, let me respond to the party's integrity committee, whatever that means, rather than actually the people of this country.
Yeah, you know, this was actually supposed to be instituted, and I remember when the ruling actually took place when it came to the Constitutional Court, there was a little bit of a buzz of excitement around how the political game for 2024 had now been almost, shifted so that it can, accommodate independent players and the like. But it looks as though this may not necessarily happen in time for 2024. Heck, I must ask you the question now, do we see actual amendments being clear-cut and put on pen and paper in 2029 for that matter? Or are we going to be seeing politicians, as you were saying, in political parties that are hell-bent on keeping the power, maintaining the privilege of a political party, not necessarily instituting the necessary amendments to allow for 2029, for example, to be a more equal playing field for politics?
Two things, Faith. The first is, I think they're going to pass this bill, and that bill is going to end up being challenged in the Constitutional Court. I'm almost certain of it. And the problem with it is that it renders the 2024 elections in serious risk, because you can appreciate that if you can't participate in an election under an act that's unconstitutional, which will mean that in effect, that puts a danger in that situation. So we've got to think about that. And then in the next 6 months, rather than simply playing the political game, we need an electoral reform CODESA of some sort, where we could say, what are the actual rules that will face 2024? Because the current act is unconstitutional. You can't pass one that's unconstitutional and hold elections. The second thing, and that's a very important decision that we've had to make, is to say, given that, it doesn't mean that we don't have to participate in a democracy in a way that we desire to see a constituency-based model. So one of the key things I'm doing is I'm going out to South Africans all over the country to identify key candidates, citizens who are ethical leaders, who come from their communities, to say, let's work under one broader umbrella body to be able to participate in the election, but let's allow for citizens to directly elect that person. And I think it's going to be a positive development, because if we can achieve that with over 200 members of parliament, you can ensure that actually constituencies have a voice, but that the people can elect the right person. And then a new formation is able to then really put on the table a proper reform of the electoral system, rather than being dependent on the current political parties in parliament.
Yeah. As you're going around the country identifying these key candidates, would you say that you would be open to being one such a candidate who is willing to run as an independent?
Absolutely. One of the things that I'm really setting up is a structure upon which all of them can run, of which I'll be one of them, and many others across the country who come from civic society, who come from faith-based organizations, who come from business, because the question, Faith, that we've all got to answer for ourselves is, do we have the best 400 people in parliament? And judging by the events of last week and accountability, I think all South Africans realize that emphatically the answer is no. So to fix that isn't going to take another political party. It is going to take a formation, a system upon which all citizens can participate. And we need to bring change, because the problems of this country are dire. Cost of living has gone up, as you know, unemployment is on the rise, and citizens do not feel safe. And if we don't act as a collective and recognize that our country is in trouble, I think 2029, whether the reform is done or not, may very well prove to be too late in terms of the nature of the changes and the reforms we need to do in this country.
Before I let you go, Mmusi, when it came to the IEC as well as its electoral process, especially when it came to the local government elections, a lot was said regarding the IEC. I mean, there were questions around, being fair, whether or not the elections were non-biased, whether or not the IEC in itself was biased or non-biased towards political parties. As we're talking here about the amendments of this Electoral Act, do we foresee the IEC playing ball in being able to maintain the equality or fairness within which political parties as well as independents participate in a voting process?
You see, and again, if we just leave the political parties to stay as they are, the potential of capturing all institutions, and IEC is a Chapter 9 institution, such as the Public Protector, such as all the other ones, the fact is you can end up capturing them. And the net consequence of it is that as you find judgments that are unfair out of the Public Protector, you can find elections that are unfair out of the IEC. This is not unique in Africa, SADC, and certainly in many countries where elections are rigged. So what we have to achieve, that's what I'm saying, the electoral reform isn't just a change in how we elect people. It's to enhance accountability so that you never capture institutions. And I am very nervous about the IEC, because as the pressure for the current government, the ANC government, losing elections they certainly will not be able to withhold the pressure that will come from the ANC to say, we need a result that is favorable to us, because they won't govern on the back of success or employment, etc. And as you have seen, that the threshold for independents to participate, or for anyone else to participate, becomes harder and more difficult, and accountability around the IEC not felt, it's important that the collective formation is established, because if you do that, then at least you've got a stronger voice within that can fight these issues in the IEC. The IEC as a body is accountable to all the people of this country, and we have to make sure they deliver a free and fair election by 2024.